welcome to this second session. I believe you have enjoyed the break and also the coffee and tea, and we are back refreshed, ready to engage deeply through the commissioned papers that are part of this conference and symposium. For this session, I am your MC, Nicholas Ouma from the African Union Commission. I want to welcome on stage our moderator for the session, Professor Gift Masaiti. I also want to welcome the key discussants for this session. I believe they are here with us. Dr. Ayenachu Asefa from Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia. Please join us here. From Kenya, also from Addis Ababa University, Professor Abeba Yirga. Then from Kenya, Professor Ibrahim Oanda, join us on stage. From Mozambique, Associate Professor Eugenia Kosa, also join us. And Professor Abdoulaye Gweye from the University of Ottawa in Canada, also join us here on stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I can see colleagues are walking in. Let's walk in, please. We start our sessions. Hope you enjoyed your coffee, your tea, your break was good. So in the interest of time, I'll make sure I give each presenter 15 minutes of presentations, and I will entertain 1 or 2 reactions from the audience, just minimal reactions so that we manage our time well. So the presenters, please take note. You'll be presenting for 15 minutes. In case you came with 1-hour presentations, you need to start adjusting in your mind, okay? I know academics can speak for the whole hour, for 2 hours, so let's adjust that. Yeah, so having said that, if you look at our program, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to our program, the first speaker is from Ethiopia. I'll request you to introduce yourself for 1 minute, just self-introduction. Just tell us where you're coming from, who you are, what you're engaged in. Then you can begin your presentation. That will be fine. So our first presenter is Dr. Ache from Addis Ababa University, Ethiopia. He'll be presenting on epistemology, this word is difficult, epistemic authority and international autonomy, assessing equitable research partnership in Ethiopian higher education, and is the co-presenter here. You're presenting it alone? Are you presenting this paper alone? Yes, so we'll give you 15 minutes to make your presentation, and as I said, in the interest of time, keep 15 minutes. I'll give you a heads up 5 minutes before time, so that we manage our time well. So please, let's put our hands together for our first presenter. Let's clap for him. Let's put our hands together.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ayenachu. I am from Addis Ababa University, and I am presenting a work of myself and my colleague, Professor Ababa, who is in the audience. So our presentation is on the epistemic authority and institutional autonomy, assessing equitable research partnerships in Ethiopian higher education. I would like to begin by saying that this is a work in progress. We are developing this into a case study. So what I'm presenting today is rather a conjuncture. So as a framing of the problem, next slide, please. Yeah. International research partnerships have become central to the global knowledge production, as Professor Marcelo was discussing earlier this morning. They are widely framed as mechanisms for capacity building, knowledge exchange, and addressing shared global challenges. However, recent scholarships increasingly show that these partnerships often involve persistent inequalities, particularly in power relationships, in authorship, and in agenda setting and decision making. So the key question we are raising is, do these partnerships actually transform inequity, or do they reproduce it in a new and less visible way? Next slide. So what makes it relevant to talk about research inequality in the context of Ethiopia? As is the case in many African countries, the Ethiopian higher education is known for its expansion, and Ethiopia provides particularly important case for examining question because over the past 2 decades, its higher education system has been expanding significantly. At the same time, Ethiopian institutions have become increasingly integrated into the global research networks, although this is a more recent phenomenon. However, this rapid expansion has not been matched by equivalent growth in research capacity, infrastructure, or governance systems. So the core tension we observe here is that expansion without consolidation, which shapes how Ethiopian institutions engage in international partnerships. Next slide. Our core argument is that the central argument of this paper, this presentation, is that international research partnerships are not neutral collaborations. They are rather embedded in broader global hierarchies of knowledge and power dynamics. As a result, they are often reproduce epistemic dominance, institutional dependency, and asymmetry in agenda setting and decision making. So equity cannot be achieved simply by including more participants from the global south. It requires a structural redistribution of epistemic authority and decision-making power. In other words, changing who defines, controls, and benefits from the partnerships. For this paper, we are drawing on 4 different theoretical lenses to develop our analytical framework. We are relying on the coloniality of power, epistemic justice, ecology of knowledge, and research well-being gap, which I will shortly touch on each. Next slide. So coloniality of power generally tells us that colonialism did not simply disappear. It has rather transformed into an enduring global structure. In research, this usually appears through control of funding, dominance of academic journals, and concentration of theory production, all in the global north. This means that Ethiopian institutions do not enter partnerships on equal footing. They enter into a system that is already hierarchically organized, where some actors have greater authority over knowledge production than others. The epistemic justice focuses on how knowledge is valued and recognized. Fricker identifies 2 key forms of injustice. The first one is the testimonial injustice, where Ethiopian scholars, or generally speaking, scholars from the South, have contributions that are usually undervalued and are given less credibility compared to their counterparts. The second one, which is the hermeneutic injustice, is, excuse me, where local knowledge systems are not fully understood or recognized within the dominant frameworks. In research partnerships, this means Ethiopian scholars may be included but not fully recognized as producers of knowledge, and also data that is collected from within locally based context would be forced into interpretation and analysis using frames that are external. Next slide. Ecology of knowledge is another lens that we drew on. The ecology of knowledge challenges the idea that there is only one valid way of knowing and thinking. Instead, it emphasizes the legitimacy of multiple knowledge systems, including indigenous and locally grounded forms of knowledge. The key concept here is what is known as epistemicide, which is a gradual, systemic, and evolutionary process of erasing or at least marginalizing non-Western knowledge. Next. The research well-being gap asks us a very practical question. Does research actually benefit the people and institutions that are involved? But in the case of partnerships, then are the benefits of research equally distributed among all that participate in the research collaboration is the question. In many cases, research outputs circulate internationally and they strengthen the global knowledge system, but they do not necessarily translate into stronger local institutions, improved researcher capacity, or meaningful community benefits. Yeah. So to look into some of the questions, what counts as equity? Based on these frameworks put together, the paper defines equity in structural terms. Equitable partnership must redistribute epistemic authority. It has to share governance and financial control, ensure data and knowledge sovereignty, and produce long-term institutional strengthening. Next one. One of the issues, again, in partnership is the agenda setting power. One of the clearest expressions of power is who defines research agenda. In many cases, research questions are formulated by northern partners or institutions before even the Ethiopian partners are involved in the process. As a result, Ethiopia is often positioned as a site of intervention rather than a source of theoretical insight. This reflects what scholars call the development gaze, where research is framed around external priorities rather than locally defined needs. Next one. Authorship and publication politics is another dimension. Authorship is, in many partnerships, controlled by northern partners. It's dominated by those who happen to be principal investigators and take the first authorship positions. Therefore, Ethiopian scholars often play central roles in data collection, fieldwork, sometimes data analysis, literature review, and so on, but they have less influence over the theoretical framing and the publication leadership. This is reinforced by global academic systems that privilege high-impact northern journals, creating structural incentives that marginalize local scholarship. Next. Financial dependency is another aspect. Financial dependency in most research funding comes from external donors, which means Ethiopian institutions and scholars often operate within externally defined project frameworks. This leads to what is generally known as projectization of research, which is a short-term, fragmented research cycle that is limited in terms of institutional development and long-term contribution for capacity building. Because those who control funding also shape the priorities, financial dependency translates directly into epistemic dependency. And we have the governance gap. Research regulation exists, but it is often fragmented, inconsistently enforced, and limited in capacity. As a result, partnership arrangements are frequently shaped by external institutions and may favor their interest in data access, intellectual property, and publication rights. Next. Community and knowledge justice. At the community level, there are also important challenges. Many research partnerships rely on Western ethical frameworks, particularly the individual consent models. However, in Ethiopian context, as I believe is the case in many African countries as well, knowledge is often collective and relational. When local knowledge is extracted, translated into external frameworks, and not returned to communities, this raises serious concerns about knowledge justice and ethical responsibility. Next slide. Research well-being gap, more in the applied side. When we look at the outcomes, we see a clear research well-being gap. There is a strong research output and international visibility due to publications in high-ranking journals. However, there is often very limited long-term institutional strengthening, sustainable infrastructure development, or accessible dissemination of the research output within Ethiopia. So knowledge flows outwards while benefits remain unevenly distributed. Next. So some policy implications to highlight. To address these challenges, we propose several policy directions. These include developing national frameworks for equitable partnerships, a comprehensive framework that would address all the issues that we have raised so far about ownership, publication, data sovereignty, and so on. Strengthening domestic research funding is another area, and also building negotiation capacity for our faculty members and researchers to engage in a meaningful relationship with their counterparties. This is simply to show what the current status quo is and what we think should be if these proposals are implemented, and if research partnership is set to be equitable, then a transformative or equitable partnership would look like this. It would have a co-designed from the very beginning. All right. Epistemic plurality and indigenous frameworks would be equally recognized in the process. Shared budgetary authority and direct grants through contribution from all concerned parties, including from Ethiopian institutions and Ethiopian government. Indigenous data sovereignty and long-term sustained institutional capacity building would be the outcomes. Next slide. In terms of institutional strategy, at the institutional level, universities need to become more proactive. This includes developing clear partnership strategies at the institutional level, strengthening research management structures, and defining standards around authorship, data, and governance. In other words, institutions must move from reactive participation to active leadership in their partnership. Final thoughts. To conclude, research partnerships are not just the technical collaborations, they are rather sites of power relationship and dynamics. The Ethiopian case reflects broader patterns across the global south. Achieving equity requires redistributing power, recognizing diverse knowledge systems, and investing in long-term institutional capability. So ultimately, equity is not about being included, it's about who defines, who controls, and benefits from knowledge production. Thank you very much.
He has set a very good tone. He has spoken within 15 minutes, exactly on the dot. Hope others are listening. Within 15 minutes, the presentation is done. I think I'll entertain reactions now. Just two reactions, in case there are reactions. He's talking about equitable research in partnership in Ethiopian higher education system. Who controls, who defines, who benefits from this partnership? That's very central. Are the benefits well spread across all partners? Do they reflect external priorities? Is there financial dependence? What is about the power relations? I think he raises very critical issues, ladies and gentlemen, and then proposes the way forward. Any reaction, one or two reactions from the audience. I don't know if you have people with microphones. Yeah, please switch on the microphones where you are. And you must be to the point. If it's a question, you ask your question. We don't want explanation. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I think the speaker was on the mark in terms of defining all the aspects, epistemic issues, etc. But I think we know this story for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's been sustained. And in fact, in some ways, I would prefer to interrogate ourselves, our institutions, and see, how have we contributed or non-contributed to this issue. Often the issue of colonialism, that those were colonies, is mentioned. In this regard, I would ask, Ethiopia and Liberia have not been colonized. How does that reflect? Does Ethiopia gain any advantage from these issues, or is it just as a victim as any of the other countries? I think let me pose my question there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the presentation. My question is related to the issue of financial governance control, which is one of the burning issues in partnerships. And how do you suggest that equity can be achieved in the context where you bring knowledge, you bring the side of research collection, but you don't bring money on the table? Because I think money is the one that has been leveraged to control the unfolding of the partnership. Thank you.
This is Manay Adela from St. Mary's University. I appreciate Dr. Ayenacho's perspective, and their issue is quite catchy. I have a concern, and I want their reflection, his reflection in terms of the partnership. When we synthesize a concept, analyze and synthesize a concept, we may get the issue of partnership locally, regionally, internationally. And I'm very, very much concerned about the myopic nature of higher education institutions. If I'm not generalizing actually, but the governance is becoming highly ethnocentric, which we shouldn't, which we don't expect to be at higher education, at university level, especially as far as I know, things are becoming worse than ever before. And given that there are ethnocentric kinds of governances in the leadership, etc., do you really think that the partnership will be fruitful when we come to the local kinds of partnerships among universities? Thank you.
Okay, please, quickly, you may want to respond to those issues.
Thank you all for the questions. Prof. Burhanu's question, I agree with you 100% that we have to look into our own systems and our own practices in terms of formulating and implementing research partnerships. If I briefly share this, I have a colleague at Addis Ababa University who told me that he had a research partnership with a Swedish university. And the project was in 4 phases, and in the first phase, all the money came to Ethiopia, and it was administered from Addis Ababa University. But they had so much problem that starting from the second phase, they rather opted for the Swedes to keep the money there and to send them as it may be necessary, as it is needed. So looking into that bureaucratic structure and investigating what we are doing right and wrong is a central thesis to our paper as well. Ethiopia being never colonized, would it be exceptional? The answer is no, it can't. Historically, we've never been colonized. We take very great deal of pride in that. However, colonialism or the mentality of colonial thinking and coloniality comes in different forms. And Ethiopian education is no exception. I think Professor Masai Kabada and Yirga Gelau have written extensively on this point, how coloniality manifests itself in Ethiopian higher education. The second question, talking about equity in governance without bringing the resources, that has been the challenge. But recently there have been some improvements that scholars from Africa are pushing back, standing their ground, negotiating, and trying to get equal opportunities. And to use Professor Marcello's word again, international partnership is a strategic necessity. And there is a growing realization of that necessity even among the northern partners. And so that gives a little bit of hope. But we have to have a framework within which we are going to negotiate. We are going to have our contributions being valued. And the third question, I think our presentation specifically focuses on international partnerships, not on the local one, but I fully understand where your question is coming from. We better keep that for a separate discussion later on at lunch.
Thank you so much. So we invite the next presenter from Kenya. Though he represented MasterCard at some point, Codeseria at some point, very experienced researcher, but he's going to introduce himself. Professor Ibrahim Oanda, please, you have the chance to present. Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name is Ibrahim Oanda. I come from Kenya, an academic and a scholar of higher education. I have had quite a period of engagement within capacity building across the continent. Sometimes I tell people that I'm happy. My capacity, if ever that was a word used, was actually built within the continent. Austria, which was located here, and I believe is still located here, was one of my areas engagement in terms of trying to find out my pathways in my academic career. Codeseria, located in Dakar, was another institution. And I said these two institutions because for me they represent what we are struggling to fix as equity in international partnerships. These were institutions that got funding, external funding, but were left to execute their mandates autonomously without interference from where the funding was coming from. And if they supported a generation, a successful generation of young academics across the continent, I try to think that was ideally the essence of that kind of stuff. I recently finished my term as head of knowledge systems strengthening at the MasterCard Foundation, working out of Kigali. And the focus then was to, explore possibilities of strengthening the research and the knowledge network across the continent, trying to figure out how we can have the research institutions and the knowledge institutions in the continent be more African focused in terms of how they executed their mandate, which is another aspect of what we are speaking about here. But also get more networked, so that they do not seem to compete for resources in a way that they remain fragmented. In terms of what I wanted to speak about here today, my first thing about this was that I needed to make it an East African case study, just because of the evolving architecture of science, technology, and innovation policies across East Africa. Countries are becoming more connected in terms of building large research and education areas. But then because of time limitations, I said, okay, let me just take a shot from what is happening in Kenya. Then maybe subsequently we will scale this up to East Africa. And in terms of Kenya, I thought I should not, get into trying to define what inequitable research partnerships are. This has been extensively documented in the literature. The question that I want to ask myself, and the question that I want us to ask ourselves is, what are we doing about this? Beyond that, we have external funding. What are the governments, what are academics and research institutions in Africa doing about this? I started this by trying to look at the evolution of research policies and institutions in Kenya. Obviously, like the rest of Africa, we find nascent research institutions beginning from the late colonial period, but these were more outphased, serving colonial economies. If you were in East Africa where we had settler economies, then we had majority of the research institutions being focused towards agriculture and livestock. In the 1960s or through to the 1990s, we have what has been framed into just the developmental decade in Africa, when states divined what kind of development their countries needed. And part of this saw the establishment of new public universities, the re-establishment of universities that had been established during the colonial period, and giving them a back mandate. But also we saw new research institutions coming up to try and articulate the kind of research skills, research competencies that the new nations needed to push through their different policies. So this is the time we kind of can say we see an emergence of, African phase, if you like, national phase research and science policies. But again, the period between 1990 to 2010, 2 decades, which the researcher will always say are those decades in terms of research and innovation in Africa. This is the time that we find African countries implementing what came to be called the Washington Consensus. In terms of universities and research institutions, there was intensive hollowing out of capacity. Terms of service deteriorated, so most of the best academics left the universities and went to do work abroad. But also we found a number of research institutions being established outside the universities to drive the agenda that donors needed, because they argued that African universities that had been set up within the development perception of the state were not well tuned to implement the neoliberal agenda that was being pushed by the. And if we are talking about unequal research partnerships, this is actually the time that unequal research partnerships were kind of institutionalized across the continent. This is the time that we found, because terms of service for academics and researchers had deteriorated so much. If you remained working in the universities, then you had to part-time somewhere, sometimes, working for any externally funding research outfit, regardless if that aligned to your discipline, or regardless if that was championing any kind of national development agenda. This is a time that we found, a lot of new civil society organizations outside the universities and outside national mandated research and academic institutions, pushing agendas that were quite parallel to what African countries may have wished to do. And lastly, I look at the post-2010 period, and this is specific to Kenya. This is the time that we have a new constitution. But the new constitution places a lot of demands in terms of how the state was going to relate to the citizens, but also what development meant in the context of the new dispensation. In terms of implications to research and knowledge production, the new constitution emphasized on evidence-based policy making. So if you needed to design different policies, in Kenya, somebody will go to court and say, no, we do not have evidence from the public that it is not going to work. So that has to change. That had to make the government change the manner in which it was thinking about evidence. But also there was more emphasis in the constitution to issues of academic freedom, but also to privileging of indigenous knowledge, indigenous institutions, and indigenous communities. And lastly, more emphasis on equity at all levels, be it academic, be it in the distribution of resources from the central government to the different regions, be it in the manner in which we were admitting students to universities, be it in the manner in which we were funding research. This had to be underpinned by a very strong equity consideration. And therefore, in terms of institutional development from 2010, we see in Kenya new institutions developing, but also old institutions being reformed to respond to this new mandate. And I find 4 of these institutions important to the kind of discussion that we have here today. First of all was the establishment of the Kenya National Commission for Science and Technology in 2013. NACOST had existed since 1977, but with a very limited science mandate. What happens in 2013 is that the government thinks now, since we have a new constitution and it's emphasizing on equity, in terms of what we have as development, we need a new outfit that would kind of act as a clearing house for all the research, knowledge production, and science that is taking place here. So NACOST is reestablished in 2013 as the first institution to be kind of a clearing hub of all the research that is taking place in Kenya. And this includes research from, masters and PhD students, but also research that is being conducted in the context of partnerships. What it has meant is that if there are research partnerships being established between universities in Kenya and external entities, be it external universities, then NACOST has to kind of act as a clearing house for this research. And thirdly, that any kind of research then being conducted and being licensed by NACOST has to be kind of responding to specific national development priorities as articulated by NACOST. So we have NACOST not just, approving research, but we have NACOST divining, research mandates. Making sure that aligns with national development priorities as articulated in the Constitution and in other documents, but also setting, being a clearing house for any kind of research that is taking place in Kenya. The second institution is the National Innovation Agency, which has been mandated to act as a clearing house for research and innovation with an eye in commercializing any innovations that are emerging from the research that is being conducted in Kenya. Again, filling a gap that had been established that previous research, was not being designed in a way that it would lead to products that could be commercialized. But secondly, that whatever innovation was taking place under the previous regime was not being intentional to the kind of need, to the kind of innovation needs of the Kenyan state. So the Kenyan National Innovation Agency does not only, focuses on how research can be commercialized, but that any research partnerships that are taking place and thinking about innovation has to be innovation that supports the national development agenda. And thirdly, it's an institution that is being charged with designing a new funding framework for research taking place. The National Research Foundation, of course, mobilizing research, mobilizing funds for research, and this includes, being an intermediary between funding that is coming outside from externally from bilateral and multilateral research organizations, funding that is coming from outside to create research partnership with universities is almost with academics in Kenya is all mobilized under the National Research Foundation. And lastly, and more importantly, the creation of a committee which kind of gives the government a sight of what is happening in terms of research, knowledge production and policy, the National Research Technology and Innovation Consortium, kind of an intersectoral and an interministerial committee that has sight of all the research that is happening in Kenya, from whatever the graduate students are doing, but also research that is being undertaken by, through partnerships. And trying to say, I mean, what kind of knowledge is getting created here? What kind of policies can be, derived from the research that has been conducted? And how does this filter into policy making and into key sectors that the government is keen on investing? So what is changing under this new architecture? Not much, of course, in terms of funding that has been mobilized. Kenya still remains stuck at 0.8% of GDP committed to research. The commitment when the institutions were being created in 2013 was that the country was going to spend 2% of its GDP on research and development, but we have not been there yet. But secondly, in order to address the whole issue of inequities in research partnerships, the National Research Foundation is trying to sign a formula of matching grants in terms of how research partnerships are being created. That if you are a partner bringing in a pot of money, say 50%, partners in Kenya should also be able to mobilize 50% of the funding, such that funding does not become an excuse of continually engaging in research which is extractive. And thirdly, a new strategy, a 10-year strategy that has been designed by the National Research Foundation, 2026 to 2036, is trying to map out how to create a predictable funding framework for research. Of course, that means looking at several options of how to mobilize research internally. Maybe new taxes, new corporate taxes, and all that kind of stuff, so that we are able to raise enough funding for research. And of course, we have research that, we have partnerships that are supporting student mobility. The destinations have increased over time. 10, 15 years ago, people would think that you had to go to Europe or North America for research and all that. But we have this getting multiplied. People are going to East Asia, people are going to South Africa, but an increasing South-South kind of student mobility is coming into play, with funding coming from those new destinations. Obviously, we will have to ask if this does not raise issues about equity in terms of the knowledge that students are getting from there. And lastly, the evolution of a new intellectual property regime that is trying to align emerging trends in research with new technologies, digital platforms, and all that kind of thing. Of course, also having implications for research in terms of how we publish, in terms of how we talk about fair research practices, and in terms of how we digitize, publishing through digitization and all that kind of thing. What has changed as a result in terms of bodies and institutions? What has changed? Of course, what I see this model here is the government centrally, trying to position itself as one, instead of leaving weak universities to start engaging external partners about equal research partnerships. Government and its agencies are coming in centrally to kind of, think about how to do this, to make sure that we are not only talking about equity in terms of who does the research, but equity in terms of, but equity in terms of, but equity in terms of what are the products coming out of that research. Of course, as the previous colleagues spoke about, we haven't seen much shifts in terms of yes, we have an increasing number of local researchers being acting as PI, but the funding has not changed. The publication location still, privileges colleagues from the north, with emerging trends in terms of funding, this means that unless funding is decoupled from thematic choices, I think there is a sense in which we will still remain talking about equity research partners at an academic level without making this. And in terms of sustainability, of course, we know what's changing. We know what has happened with the establishment of USAID and the reduction of funding from other countries. Of course, this means that there is a contradiction. We are talking about an increased appreciation that research partnerships should be equal. But we are reducing funding in a way that then we do not have the kind of funding that should support this equity in such person. I mean, the overall policy shift that I see in Kenya is towards more equal, ethical, and locally led research partnerships that emphasize knowledge transfer and societal impact. Obviously, we do not want research partners to be, a pact between just researchers themselves. Even if we embrace all of the benchmarks of equity research partners between researchers themselves, unless whichever research we are doing is designed in such a way that is transformational at the societal level, then I don't think that we will have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that presentation. Again, he's been trying to articulate the issue of policy shifts, institutional trends, international research partnerships. What are some of these barriers to realizing this equity? What are some of the barriers? And surely you have heard from Kenya, a lot of institutional framing has been done. Institutional changes over time has been done. Different bodies have been put in place, and have even gone further to have a policy that determines how partnership financing will be conducted. That's interesting, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I invite just two reactions because my mentor has chewed this time, so it means he was going to have limited reaction. James, I see your hands. Please, you can go ahead.
Kind of a soup of organizations here: NRF, RISA, ANARTIC, SRI, et cetera, et cetera. Is it now possible to close up these offices completely and then commit some of those resources to the things which we have been crying since time immemorial? I mean, I can keep on pontificating, but I think the question is clear. Is that right, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, commit resources to what? Just close those offices, commit the resources to?
What we have always been asking, funding research.
Point taken, thank you.
The issue of AI. Kenya has an AI policy that is yet to be fully cascaded down to the universities. Which way do you think we are going to take based on your analysis? Thank you.
Thank you. Very precise questions. AI policy.
My friend Tamtu, let me answer this in two ways. So far, so good. If I see what the institutions are as an academic, you ask myself, why all these institutions are, what are they doing? For one, having been in the sector for quite a while, we are now able to mobilize more funding to support especially masters and doctoral students in a more coherent way than it was before. NACOS remains more, NACOS and the National Innovation Agency, they remain regulated institutions. And the National Research Fund and the other committee, which is an interministerial committee, are more of operational. But that also has to take into account how fast the sector has grown and how big the mandate has grown, especially when you look at the commitments that the government is making towards science, technology, and innovation. Maybe we give them out to 2030, and then we say, oh, it was what they were created also so bad, we wasted money again, right? But so far, so good. I would not want to condemn them at this level, especially when they are still engaged with policy evolution and policy clarity, right? Yeah. So in terms of AI, if I answer as
I'm just pushing the idea. It feels we have all these institutions which are administrative heavy.
I mentioned 4 institutions.
Yes, I'm thinking he thinks there's too much money being consumed in the administration. Why not just give it to research, I think he said, we have all these institutions in Africa, sometimes well-funded in terms of organization, but less money going into research. Why don't just close it and give the money to research?
Yeah, I mean, if we have evidence that they are consuming more money than they are giving, we will rethink. I mean, I'm an academic. I'm not in the government. I don't make policy.
So we are not putting you on the spot. That's the thinking. Thank you so much. Sure.
But let's give them some attitude. In terms of AI, I think we are still struggling to understand what this is and what this means. you know, like I said yesterday, like it was the previous period, our first reaction is to go in, just saying something would have come, let us embrace it. And then start thinking later, I think here we overdid it. I know that the innovation agents is busy, designing a policy to guide the government in AI. And just 2 weeks ago, if you remember, there is a member of parliament who passed the bill to have the government have a better control in terms of how the institutions are going to develop AI policies and all that. So we are still at a very tentative stage. But, as obvious, we will have just take into it like ducks take into water. Then we start reflecting what is good in this and compound. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a hand to Prof once more. And this is my mentor, so we must clap highly, Yeah, thank you so much. Let's invite our professor from Mozambique. She's Professor Eugene Kosa from University of Eduardo Mdalena University in Mozambique. She'll be presenting on equitable partnership in higher education in Mozambique, strategies for sustainable collaboration and institutional strengthening. I know you're familiar with Mozambique and Angola. We're under I think the Portuguese colonial masters. Sometimes there could be a few digressions, few differences from other, but we want to learn more about the partnership, who are you partnering with, and we can learn more about. Please, you have the stage to make your presentation, Prof, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
I am Eugenia Costa. I am from the Eduardo Mondlane University, Faculty of Education. I am academic, but I have been serving the Ministry of Science, Technology and Higher Education as the National Director for 10 years. But now I'm back to the academy where we have the freedom. And I'm going to share with you a study that we have conducted with my colleagues. We are 3 in the team. About equitable partnerships in higher education in Mozambique, strategies for sustainable collaboration and institutional strengthening. The content has 5 points: introduction, objectives, methodology, results, and conclusion. I will start off sharing with you the evolution of higher education institution partnership in Mozambique. In terms of history, Mozambique has bilateral and multilateral partnerships. But there's the evolution of higher education partnership in Mozambique is divided in 3 parts. The first part is after our independence. We became independent in 1975, and we were only having 1 higher education institution for the whole country, public institution. And the aid in this period was driven for the capacity building and the reconstruction of the higher education institution in terms of reforming the entire higher education structure in all subsystems of education. In terms of the partnerships in this period, were basically where we use it as the basic institutional survival and to support the technical staffs. The second phase was the shift from aid to trade. It means that in the decade of 90s, the government decided to change the constitution, the Republic Constitution, to open for the free marketing. In this regard, there was space for the entrance of the private higher education institution. That's why we said that in this phase we have the shift from aid to the trade. The partnerships in this phase were driven by marketing logic, competition, global rankings, and external donor agencies. For example, we have here the theory of human capital, because the aid was directed, the partnerships were directed for the capacity building to train the staff for the education sector. The third phase, we call it the new global contract, from present to the future. In this phase, there is a demand for equity, and there is a push toward the collaborative epistemic justice. Also, there is a push for the co-designing research and solving shared global challenges. We are talking here about the climate changes is a global challenge, and we are talking also about the inequality. And we say because of this, there is a need to have a balanced South-South and North-South cooperation. Yet in introduction, we are bringing here three concepts that were guiding us for the study. And these concepts are relating the partnerships from global north to global south. And from these three concepts, we came up with what we call epistemicide and the asymmetry of power. The first concept is about the scientific extraversion, where the global south researchers are frequently relegated to data collectors, are treated as the data collector, and serving the externally defined agendas, rather than co-creation of theoretical frameworks. This is what we call as scientific extraversion. The second concept has to do with the epistemic injustice. As defined by Flicker and Santos, knowledge are produced in the global south, is often rendered invisible or subordinated to Western paradigms, and this results has epistemicide of scientific knowledge. The third concept has to do with the language barriers. There is an hegemony of English in academic publishing, and it is a limitation for the Lusophony researches. In terms of objectives, we challenged us to understand the condition, practice, and challenges involved in forming equitable partnership in Mozambican higher education, and focusing on strategies for sustainable collaboration in research, training, innovation, and local development. And to operationalize these big objectives, we defined 6 specific objectives. The first objectives, please go back to the objectives. Can you go back to the objectives? Yes. The first objectives was to identify the profile and the trends of research partnerships in Mozambican higher education institutions. The second one was to present the governance models and institutional policies. And the third one, to assess issues of equity, epistemic justice, and the balance of power, and followed by the need to assess the financial sustainability of partnerships. And we identified also the most impactful practices concerning training, academic mobility, and capacity building. And the last one was to propose the guidelines for the institution to strengthen the sustainability and equitable partnerships. In terms of the methodology and the sampling process, we involved 56 higher education institutions, and from this total, we selected 28 higher education institutions, 22 were public and 34 were private. The collation techniques, we used the online surveys to describe the cooperation and the research unity across the 28 higher education institutions. We used also the semi-strategic interview, and we used also the document analysis. In terms of the results, because as I referred earlier, we have the 6 specific objectives. We select some key results, and in terms of the profile and types of partnership, first we asked the participants to indicate if in the institution they have active partnerships, and the response was yes, represented by 92%. And from those who said yes, we asked them to indicate the types of the partnership that are most active. And the participant indicated the national partnerships and foreign higher education partnership has the most active. And we also noticed that there is a significant level of collaboration with governmental institutions and private companies, and also with non-governmental organizations. And it has arguments in some authors that the bilateral cooperation must be priorities in Africa. In terms of partnership thematics, we noticed that there is a strong alignment with global agendas, focusing on science, technology, and innovation, followed by sustainability and socioeconomic development. However, this concentration of the thematic areas suggests the existence of a potential cognitive on external priorities. In terms of the governance and institutional policies, while institutional framework exists, their practical application faces challenges. In terms of the frameworks, 70% of the institutions have their formal policies, and the 84% have dedicated management units. In terms of the criteria to select partners, the results indicated that the partners are selected based on thematic affinity, also based on reputation and local contribution. However, there are still existing asymmetries. Despite the formal evaluation, the initial design and negotiation phases are heavily influenced externally by external priorities. It means that we still experience the governance vacuum. In terms of the equity, epistemic justice, and power balance, we note that only 7% of the respondents consider power to be fully balanced, while 44% view it has only partial balance. In terms of the intellectual property, a significant gap exists, as only 56% of the institutions have a formal mechanism to ensure the fairness and in authorship and intellectual property. There is a need for any equity, true equity, to be an effective sharing of decision-making power. In terms of the financing and sustainability of partners, we asked the participants to indicate the main funding sources, and they indicated that it is the international actors that provide these main funding sources, and the government provides only 29%. We are here experiencing in Mozambique the so-called paradox of sustainability, because there is a gap between formal plans and financial realities. In terms of the capacity building, mobility, and practice, participants were asked to indicate the initiative that has more impact. The teacher exchange and the community project were indicated as those with impact, followed by short courses and workshops. And as Simao says, cooperation has historically been oriented towards training abroad and attracting institutional support. In terms of the practice, participants were asked to say something about the asset management. While 64% of the assets remain with the beneficiary institution, 40% of institutions, they are likely clear policy on its destination. Okay. In terms of the strategic guideline for institutional strengthening, the participants proposed the use of the SAE model, and also the need for a business mindset as advocated by Clark. Here is the model of the the figure of SAE model. We have to be aware, become critical consciousness, and we have to connect in terms of horizontal trust. It means that we have to restructure the governance. We have to move beyond the reactive addition to formalize transparent responsibilities. We need a clear IP. We need transparent responsibilities, and we need to have a clear IP ownership, and also clear asset management policies before the projects begin. In terms of the empowerment, we need to shift from external accountability to internal capacity. We need to cultivate a business mindset to diversify funding, sustain laboratory independently, and we ensure the partnership building permanent institutional capital, not just for individual resumes. In terms of conclusion, Mozambican higher education institutions are showing a high level of integration into cooperation networks, with 92% of institutions maintaining active partnerships. The study also confirms that the power remains largely unbalanced in partnership with foreign institutions. Financial dependence is a central challenge, and there is a noted shift from win-win investment models, and the study identified a business mindset as a necessary strategy for maintaining research infrastructures like a laboratory. The Mozambican higher education institution also increased the institutional maturity by demanding great strategy protagonism with key recommendations for the future, including the following recommendation: great involvement in initial negotiation, and clear formalization of responsibilities. There is a need to ensure financial transparency and strengthen internal management capacities. We need to move toward a model where equity is defined by the redistribution of scientific recognition and institutional sustainability, positioning the Global South as an autonomous actor rather than just a beneficiary. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Mozambique. I have a complaint, ladies and gentlemen. The speakers are not listening to the chair. What should I do? Yeah. Anyway, that's a very good presentation with evidence and research. That was very rich, and we've learned a lot about Mozambique, especially historical evolution. That adds a lot of value. Epistemic issues, including language issues, I think that's very critical. But most importantly is the paper which focused on profiles of these collaborations, governance models of these collaborations, and also financial sustainability. Are they impactful? Guidelines for institutions, all these are very clear. And clearly, it looks like Mozambique has similar challenges like other countries. Challenges of financing coming from the West, challenges of international partnership driven by the Western ideologies, or the global North, if you like, very limited South-to-South partnership, and so on and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, I open the floor for 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Oh, we have a question online from Mozambique. People are listening online. I'll just ask this question. Yes, Professor Kosa, thank you for your presentation. Given the fluctuation of public budgets in many of our nations, what innovative public-private partnership models have proven effective in funding research without compromising academic authority in Mozambique? Do I need to repeat the question? The question again, thank you for your presentation, I thank you. Given the fluctuation, the changes in the public budgets in many of our nations, I think these African nations, what innovative public-private partnership, PPP, what innovative public-private partnership models have proven effective in funding research without compromising academic authority in Mozambique? The question clear now? Thank you so much. I'm still looking for questions from the audience. If you have any question, please just raise up your hand wherever you are. I'll point. I can see a hand over there. Please go ahead, sir.
My name is Malaku from St. Mary University. Thank you, Professor, for your wonderful presentation. So the discussion so far, the presentation so far, really shows us that the dominant partnership in Africa is the North-South collaboration, For example, in the latest presentation, Professor indicated that almost 60% of the fund comes from outside. So there is what we call it funding dependency. Besides that, our authors maintain secondary roles. In most cases, they maintain secondary roles. So besides this, there is what we call this colonial and linguistic ties. With all this needs, I think we need to push for a growing push for South-South partnership. So what do we say in that regard? What do you say? Otherwise, the problem will continue like this. Plus, we are using...
Yes, so I think question noted. The question has been noted.
It's the same question.
Yeah.
We are depending on external cloud infrastructure. We don't have our servers locally used. So this is also another problem. That's what we call it data colonization. All these things must be considered. So there is a need for growing push for South-South partnership. So what do you say, all of the presenters so far? Thank you.
So you need a comment on...
How is the public concern treated, if you have tried to find out? The other is, what if institutions become in conflict? In partnership, we often think of cooperation, but what if there could be a conflict? What kind of arbitration mechanism will there be? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think in the interest of time, keep your question. If you have a bit of time at the end, then we can engage. And Professor, you won't respond now. Just keep your questions. I want us to combine the two presentations. You respond at the end in the interest of time.
So what I'm going to do is, instead of reading any paper, just briefly summarize the topic. Damtu invited me to write a paper on partnership, an African partnership with, institutions from other parts of the world. And I've made the decision to focus my paper on the Senegalese partnership with the rest of the world. As all of you know, there's a whole bibliography about decoloniality, and in particular the effect of the colonial legacy on African production and African knowledge production. I have always thought that this bibliography is reductionist. It has been missing a lot of things. So what I will try to do is, first of all, to dwell on two aspects of partnership. The first aspect is that partnership is multiform. It can have several forms. We know that scholars or institutions come together in order to publish something. So there is partnership through publication. We also know that institutions could come together, pool their resources, that is money, in order to bring to the fore a research. So this is a financial montage in terms of partnership. We also know that partnership could go through co-authorship, several people coming together in order to write a paper. We also know that partnership could be done through data collection. So somebody in Ethiopia or in Senegal would come along with somebody in the United States, gather data, collect the data, but then when the publication comes, there is only the name of one of these people. So these are several forms of partnership. But partnership is also multi-grounded. There is what I call the local partnership, that is several institutions from the same country coming together in order to build something in terms of research. There is also what I call, very briefly, international partnership. That is an institution in a specific country such as Senegal reaching out to an institution based in Ethiopia or in Nigeria or in the United States in order to produce research. But we have to break down the very concept of international partnership, because in international partnership we have what I call the coloniality-induced partnership, that is a form of partnership that is the result of the colonial legacy. There's also what I call the westernization-induced partnership, that is a country such as Senegal wanting to be modernized or to create a modern academic system, reaching out to any country in the West. I'm reducing here the West to what we call the OECD countries, just for the sake of brevity, and then build something. We also have another form of partnership that I call the margin-induced partnership. This is partnership with countries that are considered as part of the margins. That is what we used to call the Bandung, aligned country in order to produce something. So if we do not take into consideration the diversity of the ground of partnership, the diversity of the forms of partnership, we may be lost into this debate about coloniality, decoloniality, and so and so. So now I'm going to get very quickly to some findings of my research. What I've noticed on the basis of this theoretical framework that I already presented is that these findings actually are built on the analysis of 7% only of the scholarship produced in Senegal between 1997 and 2007, just to be clear. So what I have noticed on the basis of this analysis is that the Senegalese-based researchers are predominantly partnering with Senegalese-based researchers. About 59% of collaboration is with Senegalese researchers and not with any Western country. The second finding is that outside of Senegal, the major country where partners are coming from is France. So this is aligned with coloniality or the colonial legacy, because France, as most of you in this room know, has colonized Senegal for about 100 years. Now, when we move to another type of finding, which is publication, that is, in which journal do Senegalese-based researchers publish their research? In other words, what is the country of location of the journal? And here we have a different reality that is appearing. Contrary to my expectation, the research published by Senegalese-based researcher does not appear mostly in French-based journals. It mostly appears in UK-based journals. That is, again, as I said, a surprise to me because I was expecting that Senegalese-based researchers, when they write their paper, would look towards France because, first of all, their language is French, that is the official language of Senegal, and second of all, the majority of Senegalese PhD graduates have graduated from French universities. But now the question is, how can we make sense of Senegalese-based researchers' earnest desire to write in journals based in the UK? Well, this is the result of the stratification of the global academic sphere today. As we know today, internationalization is synonymous with the use of English language. And as we also know, there are many journals in English language that are produced from the UK. So Senegalese researchers wanting to be international, meaning wanting to have their research visible at the international level, instead of targeting French-based journals, are targeting journals based in the Anglophone world and in particular in the UK. So this is, again, as I say, a quite significant finding which call into question the whole theory laid out by my friends and foes in the decolonial landscape of the literature. So, because I don't have much time and I don't want to abuse the time, I'm just going to leave it here, and if you have questions, I can elaborate further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Rise them to Chumiarai. Thank you so much. Yeah, but this is a good opportunity to engage. But a few things which have come out, which are very interesting for Senegal, for this case for Senegal. The nature of partnership, I think that's interesting, that Senegalese researchers are collaborating amongst themselves. That's very interesting. The second issue is expected, collaborating with France. But what is very surprising is that they're not publishing in France on the French medium journal, they are publishing in the English medium journal, especially in the UK. That's very interesting. And we need to, and also you mentioned something, Professor, we need to, epistemic issues, stratification, and what the global knowledge system is pushing. Yeah, so I think these points are worth keeping. Thank you, keeping your presentation to the point and very clear in our mind. Thank you so much. I will invite comments for just three comments. I know it's almost time for lunch. 3 comments. 12:45, okay. Maybe no comments. Tefel, I hear you, but I know people are itching to talk. Okay, we're just here. Dento, and can I allow just the lady to respond? Just 2 minutes, because she was asked questions. Thank you so much. Yeah, please, let's be precise to the point. Answer your questions.
Thank you. I will start with the second question, where there is a suggestion to push the South-South partnership. I agree with this. There is a need not only to rely on North-South partnership, we have also to value the South-South partnerships. But it's important to say that when Mozambique became independent in 1975, we were having a partnership with the South-South global, like Cuba, Soviet Union, and the other countries. But we still need to value the South-South partnerships. About the first question, because of the fluctuation of changes, I mean, this question, it has something to do with political issues, But I think that what we need as a Mozambique, we need policies, that clear policies on the PP partnerships. We need to have it, and
Okay, so conversation continue over lunch. I know, Professor Blai, people want to ask you questions over lunch. If you have any questions, please, let's have an interaction over lunch. I bring this session to a close now. Thank you so much. But the interaction will continue. There are questions online. I know online participants, please, we have seen your questions. We pass them on to the presenters. Thank you so much. We'll break for lunch now so that we come back on time. Thank you.